Hi everyone, this is Irit Bloom and I would like to welcome you to my bonus session on taking training online, practical tips. Hopefully there will be some more information in here which will help you feel more confident if you haven't been doing online training before, or possibly even teach you a useful tool or trick if you have. I'm going to start by briefly discussing what terms we might use to describe online training. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about tools for online training. Now, I'm talking about practical tools here, such as the technology, things like lighting. I'm not going to be discussing how to coach effectively online. That topic I'm hoping was covered sufficiently in my earlier presentation. It's not the dogs, it's the people, getting training clients on board in person and online. Hopefully all of you found your way here from there. If you did not, please go check out the recording. Here I'm going to be talking about more practical sort of nuts and bolts things. And I'll also go over a couple of other considerations as you're starting to move forward with online sessions. Let's briefly discuss what to call online sessions. Now, it is my understanding, although I do not really have expertise in this, that there are ways to research what search terms people in your area are using in Google. And so you might want to do that. I will tell you that I've heard various different things about what search terms are most popular as this pandemic has gone on. And I've been doing online training since long before 2020, so I just kind of called it online training most of the time, but there are other terms you could use. You could say virtual training, you can say online training, you could say remote training, you can say video training, and in the medical profession they use telemedicine. I suppose we could use teletraining. What I will do if I'm afraid that there's going to be a misunderstanding is I will often put more than one term in, like I'll say virtual online training or something like that. Do be wary of the term remote training, because some people might think remote training means you are using an electronic or shock collar, and the remote is that you are at a distance from the dog. But whatever term you use, the odds are it won't be a problem, and the odds are people will understand what you're talking about. If you're in doubt, use more than one term. So let's get into some practical tools that you need. And I'm going to go into each of these in a little more detail, but as a general overview, we're going to talk about a contract or a waiver, insurance, payment, scheduling, meeting tools, which come in a wide variety, and follow-up communication tools. In addition to all the normal clauses that you would have in a contract, you know, releases of liability, waivers, that kind of thing, you also may want to pursue having a video waiver in your online session contract. And that's because you're going to be meeting with people via video one way or another, and I'm going to recommend that you record the sessions. This is something I'll talk about more a little further on. So it's a good idea to get written permission from the client to video record them. You can also ask for permission to share that video down the line. But even if they give you permission, I strongly, strongly recommend that you always check with the client first before you actually share their video or use their video in any way. Another thing you're going to want, if you don't already have it, is permission to contact their veterinarian. Perhaps in your in-person service area, you know all the veterinarians, they're always sending you people, you communicate a lot, but as you do online sessions, you're going to get clients who are from farther and farther away, and you might not know their veterinarian. And now that you're doing online sessions, that veterinarian could become a referral source. And just as in all cases, you might want to send the client to the veterinarian to check for some kind of medical issue. So getting express permission to contact the veterinarian is a really good idea. And the one other thing you need to consider is, how am I going to get that contract signed? Now, I will tell you, I have had one client since I started doing online training who could not figure out how to sign a contract online, and I literally mailed her the contract. She signed it, mailed it back. I countersigned it, mailed her a copy. But the vast majority of your clients will be able to figure out how to fill out a contract online. There are lots of options out there. I personally used to use DocuSign, which is actually the standard in the legal community for all except for very few types of documents where something called a wet signature, which basically means it needs to be done by hand in ink. The legal community uses DocuSign for a lot of stuff, but not anything that requires a wet signature. Nothing we do should require a wet signature, by the way, but always check with your attorney. I have since moved to EverSign, which I really like. I find that for the price, they give me a really, really nice product. There are also free options for online contract signing. What you want to look for is a company that keeps track of when the contract was created, when it was opened, when it was signed, so that if anything ever does come up and you need to go to court, you have a record of the time that the person signed, what address, what ISP address they logged in from, where their computer was. It gives you a little bit more security in case there's ever any kind of conflict. And for all of the contract, I just want to reiterate something that I hope is obvious to all of you, which is get an attorney to check it over. It doesn't cost that much money to have an attorney spend half an hour or an hour reviewing your contract or a few hours making a contract. The few hundred or couple thousand at most dollars you would spend on that can save you tens of thousands of dollars down the road in litigation if something goes wrong. Speaking of things going wrong, you also want to make sure that your insurance covers online sessions. Don't assume. Reach out to your insurance agent and ask. And if you don't have insurance, I'm just going to tell you right now, as a pet professional, you need insurance. Go get it. What about payment? I'm not going to be meeting with the client in person. I can't get them to hand me a check. Also, I'm probably not ever going to meet the client in many cases, or if I do, it'll be way down the line, so what if they decide to stiff me? Well, the key with online training is get payment in advance. I actually literally just today canceled a session because the client did not send me payment, the potential client did not send me payment far enough in advance, and that is a hard line policy for me. I need the money before we meet, because after we meet, I have no way to really enforce my demand for payment without going through a lot of legal hoops. So get payment in advance. And as for how to get payment, I'm just going to tell you there are a million options out there. There's PayPal, there's Zelle, there's Square, there's Stripe. Look around, compare your options, think about what's easy for you. Bear in mind what charges and fees are involved. Make sure you're comfortable with their refund policy. Find out how you can give money back and that sort of thing. But do your due diligence and then find a system that works for you. The system that works for me may not be the one that works for you, but as I said, sort of the major players, I think there's Google Pay, there's PayPal, Zelle, Square, Stripe. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting. Just take a look, compare your options, find what works for you. Scheduling is another topic you might want to revisit as you start doing online sessions. You could just manually schedule your clients, which I'm sure some of you are doing, and bluntly, I do a great deal of the time. But if you want to make your life a little easier, you could actually use online scheduling software for your online sessions. Now, if you, like me, are someone who typically, when in-person sessions are happening, drives to clients' homes, there's a benefit to manual scheduling because you can make sure that you're not driving from one end of your service area to the other and then back again because clients scheduled themselves in and they happen to be at opposite ends of your service area. But now that all you're doing is sitting at your computer, you can just set the times you're available and have a scheduling software or scheduling platform take care of the scheduling for you. I personally use Acuity for this. I know there are others. I can't think of all of their names right now. Again, look around, find one that you like, see what their costs are, see how they set things up. Can you block off times? Can you require certain gaps? Can you require payment in advance, which Acuity does? Acuity makes them pay before they can schedule their session. As you're doing all of this, I also want you to consider where your clients are. So just as hopefully your reach is expanding, one of the things that may happen is that you may wind up in different time zones. Right now I have clients in, 4 or 5 different time zones. And so whenever I'm scheduling, I have to make sure that I remember, is that person in Pacific time, which is where I am locally, or are they in London time, which is Greenwich Mean Time technically, or are they on East Coast time? Make sure that you take the time zone into account. Online scheduling software will usually do that for you, but if you're scheduling manually, make sure you don't tell them 9 a.m. and they're 9 a.m. in New York and you're 9 a.m. in Los Angeles and you're not meeting at the same time. Something that I find really handy, if I do put together, say, a Zoom meeting, Zoom allows you to download different types of calendaring files. Those are great because they will put it in the right time zone for them no matter what time zone you put it in for yourself. So ICS files are these calendar standard files that Outlook uses and Apple Calendar uses. You can also put something in a Google Calendar form. There are useful shortcuts out there. Pay attention, look for them, use them. If you have clients who are hesitant and concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to handle the meeting software, another thing you might want to do when you schedule is send them a link to a meeting or technology tutorial in advance. And you can either make one, or a lot of these online meeting programs kind of have their own tutorials. You can take advantage of theirs. And above all, remember, you're going to get that contract signed in advance. I don't think I said that earlier. Always make sure the contract is signed before you have that session, and get your payment in advance so that you don't accidentally get stiffed. There's a huge variety of online meeting software options out there right now, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. I used to use Skype for meetings back in the day, sometimes FaceTime. I've even used Google Hangouts. I go back that far. These days, I basically exclusively use Zoom. I am very comfortable in Zoom. I really like the way their system works. I understand the little quirks of it, and I have very few issues where clients have trouble signing on. Zoom works pretty smoothly for me. I know a lot of people also like a program called BlueJean, so that's another one you might want to look into. But just as with everything else, take a look, see what the costs are. I pay for my Zoom meetings so that I can have people join with multiple cameras. In fact, I will try to make a mental note now to talk about multiple cameras in a moment. But I pay for Zoom. You might not want to pay for Zoom. There is a free version, but if there's more than 2 people in the meeting, then your time gets cut off. Similar restrictions exist with almost anything that's free. So look in your different options, decide if you want to pay or not pay, and look at what the restrictions are if you choose to go with a free option. Another thing you need to consider before you start having online meetings is whether you are set up well for it. So I pay for pretty high-speed internet because I want to make sure that my bandwidth, which means how much data I can stream through my internet, that's called bandwidth. I want to make sure that my bandwidth is pretty high and that my connection speed is fast so that that data gets to the people quickly. Those are related, bandwidth and connection speed, but they're not entirely overlapping. You also want to make sure that the computer you're using has a sufficiently fast processor. The processor is what's going to show the video, so to speak, process that video, and send it to the online meeting software. So if your processor is really slow and you can't really do video in real time, it doesn't matter how fast your bandwidth, how good your bandwidth and connection speed are, you will have issues. So make sure that you have a relatively modern computer. Zoom has a whole article on technical considerations and figuring out whether or not you have sufficient technology and bandwidth and so on, whether your computer's good enough and your connection's good enough. Look that up, or go look up, Blue Jeans article on that topic. I'm sure they have one too. And no matter how good your bandwidth and connection speed, no matter how fast your processor, you want to have backup contact options for when things fall apart. I make sure that I always get a phone number, an email address, and I ask my clients if they're willing to share a cell phone. Most of them, their phone number is a cell phone these days anyway. So if the call drops, the meeting drops, or we have some other kind of issue, I can literally pick up my phone, call them up and say, hey, listen, I'm really sorry, my internet just went out. Or I can text them from my cell phone, which hopefully is still working even if my internet went out, and so on. So make sure you have some backup contact options in place, and make sure you have that information from the client in case you need it. Obviously, the most important component of online sessions these days is decent video. So you need to think about what kind of camera you have and what kind of camera the client has. Obviously, you have less control over what kind of camera they have, but you can make suggestions, suggest a webcam. I'll often suggest to clients where to put the camera so that I can see better. Do not be afraid to say, all I can see is the dog's feet, because often they don't know, especially if they're using a laptop. They can't see what the camera is seeing if they're holding the laptop the opposite direction so that the built-in camera will get the image. Now, as for the camera quality, if you have a modern computer, a computer that's less than, say, 3 years old, most of those are going to have a pretty decent built-in webcam. The same applies to most of our cell phones and tablets, iPads, etc. So one option is just to have the client use those and for you to use those. And in fact, I use my built-in webcam for just about everything. You can also get a dedicated camera, one that's a separate webcam that you mount somewhere. And in a moment, I'll talk about where to mount it. And another really fun thing you can do in online meetings is if you notice that, hey, they've got a couple of cell phones, you can say, hey, you know what? Do me a favor. I'd like you to keep working here with the laptop with the angle I have right now, but can you get your daughter to pick up one of the cell phones, turn the volume to 0, mute that cell phone, and join the meeting? And can you get your spouse to pick up the other cell phone, turn that volume to 0, mute the phone, and give me a third angle, and then I'll have 3 angles on what you're doing, and it'll be so much easier for me to help you. And by the way, I can record all 3 of those angles in the video if I'm recording the video, depending on what system you're using. So that way, I can get more angles, and it's easier for me to catch subtle differences in the way they're doing something from what I'm asking for, as well as subtle body language signals. The only thing you need to make sure of if you're using multiple cameras is that you don't wind up with a sound feedback loop, and that is why I ask them to turn the volume to 0 so I don't hear the output on multiple devices, and also mute the device so that the device isn't hearing what the other devices are doing. Having said all this, I just want to make one quick note, which is as the trainer, I do not recommend you use a cell phone for your meetings. It's not the easiest thing to manipulate and hold so that you can make sure you're well in frame, and there's always the possibility that it will run out of battery or drop the signal. Speaking of feedback, let's take a moment to talk about sound for online meetings. I'm going to start by talking about input, and what input means is that the sound that comes into the meeting or into the computer, depending on how you want to look at it. So that's the microphone end, right? So you can just use the built-in microphone in your computer or your tablet or your phone. Those actually tend to be pretty high quality. I do sometimes have problems when there are 2 clients, that is to say there's 2 people in the household, and they're both next to the computer, but one is closer. I can have trouble hearing one or the other. But I'm not exactly in a position to make them buy multiple microphones, so that's not always an option. You can also use a separate microphone, a completely separate microphone, like the one you see in old-timey radio shows. Or you could use a headset microphone, a microphone that is attached to your headset. Some of the modern earbuds these days actually have an input as well as an output, so those can also have a microphone function. The important thing is to make sure that your sound is clear and that you're not picking up a lot of ambient noise in the background. So I always use a headset microphone because things might be going on in the background because the headset microphone has a mic right in front of my mouth, basically. It picks up what I say better than it picks up anything else. And I've even been in positions where I'm talking to a client, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about the thumping upstairs, and they can't hear it. Now, having said all of that, obviously, again, as a trainer, I am not going to recommend that you use a phone. Battery can die. Sound quality can sometimes be poor. Signal can be lost, etc., etc. But find a microphone that makes you sound clear. And as much as possible, help your clients position themselves so that you can hear them clearly during the meeting as well. So let's take a look now at the sound output side. And the output side is where you are hearing the meeting sound from, which is like your speakers in an old-fashioned stereo system. So you could use the built-in speaker in a computer or a tablet or a phone, but I'm going to tell you right now that feedback can become a real issue if both you and your client are using the computer microphone and the computer output system. Sometimes what happens is your computer hears their output coming back, and you actually get into a feedback loop, and you'll get that sort of feedback whine or just unpleasant sounds. It gets hard to hear each other. So I recommend headphones instead, because the headphones at least control my part of the feedback loop. If the only person who can hear the sound coming from the meeting on my end is me because I have my headphones in, their computer can't hear it, fewer bad things tend to happen. You can use wireless headphones, which in fact I'm using right now. You could use wired headphones. I know there used to be headphones with wires. It's shocking, I'm sure. No, seriously, you can use wired headphones. That's totally fine. What I like about the wireless headphones is I can stand up and demonstrate things without worrying about my headphones falling out. Or you could also use, well, I guess it's not an or. And in the wireless, you could use earbuds or an over-the-ear type. The same is true for wired. You can have earbuds that fit inside your ear or an over-the-ear type. My understanding is that the earbuds are more likely to damage your hearing, and I personally find over-the-ear headphones more comfortable. But your mileage may vary, as they say, so pick something that's comfortable and works for you. I'm just going to strongly suggest that you do use headphones because they will prevent feedback issues, and they almost always make the sound quality better because the client isn't hearing themselves through your system yet again. And again, I'm just going to keep saying this. Remember, you probably don't want to use a phone. The output on phones is particularly tinny, although with a headphone you don't have that problem. But the phone speaker is likely to be less high quality than anything you're going to get through a headphone, or for that matter, something you're going to get through a computer. So we've talked about video and making sure that everything streams nicely. We've talked about sound. How about making yourself look good? So the first thing I'm going to say is lighting is the most critical piece of looking professional in an online meeting. If you just rely on the ambient light, by which I mean the daylight that is streaming in through your windows, you are not likely to look good. Also, if you have a window behind you, you will be silhouetted and the client will not be able to see your face. And since body language is an important part of communication, you want to make sure they can see your face clearly. Please do not position yourself backed up against a light source such as a window or a bright lamp. You could also use ordinary lights in your room, and that can be good enough depending on how well lit an area is and also where you position yourself within that area. But I personally like to take it an extra tiny step, and it's really the tiniest step, and get something that's a little bit more professional looking. And I'm not talking about going out and buying a $500, setup where you have bright lights that are coming from multiple angles. Yes, there is actually a way to do this professionally. You're supposed to have a a key light and a background light, and there's different ways you're supposed to light yourself. Feel free to go look those up. But what I'll tell you is what I do is I buy a light bulb with a very good color rating so that the light is nice and white. It's not yellow, it's not blue, it's like a nice clean color, and it's a bright light. And I have lights around me, but that bright light shines directly towards me. That means that I'm never looking like I'm in a silhouette, and I actually pop from the background a little bit better as a result. Also, it smooths out wrinkles. So if you're worried about how you look from that point of view, having a light that is facing you is very helpful. You can go look up online, how do I light myself to look well on video? There are a million tutorials on this. Go check one out. Once you have your lighting set up, the other thing you want to make sure is that you dress professionally. Just because you are in your home does not mean you should be wearing your PJs when you meet with clients. Now, I personally am uncomfortable if I'm sitting down in jeans all day or that kind of thing, so I actually wear sort of a nice-looking running skirt, but my clients almost never see that. And the top half of my body, I have one of my business polo shirts. That's as professional as you need to look. You know, just look like you're not wrinkled, you're from a professional company. A nice polo shirt is professional enough. You could also wear, you know, a nice T-shirt with your brand on it as long as, again, it's not wrinkled, it's not faded, it's not stretchy. If you never show them the bottom half of your body, I suppose you could walk around in boxer shorts. I personally use a very plain black running skirt that basically looks like it's a going out sort of short skirt. It's kind of a skirt that you can take from running to life is the theory, and that's worked well for me. Find something that works well for you. And then most importantly, consider the background you are up against. If your background is very cluttered and there's a lot going on, they're going to be focusing on the background and not you. The other thing about the background is it can actually be problematic if you have something like a window, as I said before, or a mirror behind you. Those can all create issues and be very distracting. So I personally either use a black backdrop or I sit in a particular place in my house where I think that the background is very pleasant, uncluttered, and simple. The other thing you need to consider about background is, are there dogs or children running in the background, and can you control that? And if you right now can't, figure out a way to make sure that things aren't wandering in and out of your background and distracting you and your client. So now I'm meeting with my client. I've got my meeting set up. I look good. I sound good. They sound good. The video is streaming nicely. What if I want to share something with them? Well, for one thing, some of the meeting softwares allow you to stream video right through them. If you're going to do this, I recommend that you save the video in a relatively internet-friendly resolution. You do not want 4K video streaming across your meeting. It will not play well. It will stutter. I usually use 720p for those who know what that means when I share video with clients, and they all seem to see it pretty well, assuming they have a decent connection. If I'm worried about the connection, I go down to 480 instead of 720. I could also say, hey, let's watch this video together. It's on YouTube. And I send them the link, and we watch it at the same time. I can also say, here's this link, and it's in Dropbox, or it's in iCloud, or it's in OneDrive. And I could use Dropbox, iCloud, or OneDrive to share a whole variety of things with the clients. So if you feel like you need to share resources with them, there's a lot of different ways to do that. I personally pay, again, to have a really, really decent Dropbox because that is where I share the recordings with my clients. But you could use any system that works well for you. One of the great things about these various meeting platforms is that most of them allow you to record your meetings. And you can record those meetings to the cloud. So, for instance, Zoom allows a certain amount of cloud storage, which you will fill up pretty fast, for the record. You can buy additional cloud storage from Zoom, but it's not the most economical cloud storage plan out there, so I do not personally choose to do that. You might find that it's the perfect fit for you, though. You can also record to the local computer. So for those of you who are familiar with Dropbox, you know that you can have folders on your computer that Dropbox automatically syncs with its cloud. And what I do is I record all of my meetings to a folder that is synced with the Dropbox cloud. And that way I have them locally on my computer for as long as I want them there, and on the cloud for as long as I want them there. And I share them with my clients where they live in the cloud, which is a really nice thing about having the files in the cloud, because if you were trying to send these videos to people, you would find that you're probably going to break your email system. So it's a much better idea to share them from the cloud. Now, remember, if you're going to be recording your meetings, once again, you need to get consent from your client. And so what I do is, at the beginning of every new client relationship, when we're having our initial consultation, I say, "Hi, welcome to my meeting. This is me. I'm so glad to meet you," et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I just want to let you know that I am recording this meeting. Let me know if you have a problem with that. But this recording is for our benefit so that we can go back and review if we want to remember what we said, or if you want to go and review how we did a certain exercise. This video will be there for your reference. And so far, I have not had a single client give me any trouble about being recorded. So I do recommend recording. It is a super useful resource. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some of the ways that you can use those recordings. Another way we can share resources with clients is sharing resources with them after the session. So for instance, those recordings that I was just talking about taking, I can send the link to the recording to my client so they can view that recording in the cloud whenever they want to. I might trim short segments of that recording to show to the client or to show to the veterinarian, or I might even send the client a list of times and say, at 5 minutes and 13 seconds, I want you to notice that Fifi was yawning. Now let's look at what happened before that and why I think maybe that yawn was a sign that she was under a little bit of stress. Video is incredibly useful, so do use it. You can trim short segments. You can point out specific places. I personally save it in a Dropbox folder for easy sharing, as I mentioned earlier. The other part of this is all of these notes and suggestions, which I used to do by handwriting, which was great because it made me be really brief. I now put in a Google Drive document or spreadsheet. So I can put in notes, I can put in instructions, I can put in feedback if they've sent me a video and they want me to see what it was about. And I create a single document that is going to be the document for that client for life, basically. So anytime we want to say, gosh, you know, I could have sworn I taught you about hand targeting. Let's go back and check for that. It's right there in the document. And they go, oh, yeah, I remember that. And we called it magnet. And I just didn't remember that they called it magnet. So when I said, hey, let's work on touch, they said, what behavior is that? And I'm able to go look it up in my document. I find these documents super, super useful. And what I basically do is I put the document, I put a date header for every new date, and then I give them the notes or instructions for that date. Right at the top, under the date, it says recording and the link to the recording. So all they need to do is go to that shared document. They can find the recording. If I've highlighted any particular times in the recording for them, they can go look it up right there. And their notes and instructions and so on are in there. So essentially what I've done is I've created a cloud-based online way to share information with the client. And they can also comment or write their own notes depending on how you set things up and let you know that they want you to look at something in the document. I'd like to discuss one more thing I find incredibly useful in online sessions, and that is props. I have all kinds of props, and I'm using the term in the stage sense, where it's things that you use on stage, basically, are called props. And in this case, the stage is the meeting. The stage is me being on camera and having to demonstrate things. Now, one of your props could theoretically be your actual dog if you use your dog to demonstrate things in online sessions. I personally prefer to use a stuffed dog because my stuffed dog is very predictable and does exactly what I want. Plus, it gets a lot of laughs. This is my stuffed dog, Wesley, on the screen. I also always have a muzzle nearby so I can show them what it would look like if I was training Wesley to accept a muzzle. I have a leash so I can put him on leash. He's in a harness, as you've seen. Maybe I have some beans or treats so I can talk to them about bean handling, or treat handling rather, excuse me. If I'm using a clicker, I will have a clicker so I can show them what it looks like. Anything else that you're going to want them to understand how to use, set that up and make sure it's within easy reach so that you don't have to go hunting around for it in the moment when you need it. One more thing that can really contribute to your success is having systems in place that make your life easier. So I have a video library. They could be my video, they could be other people's videos. I don't care. I have a video library for all the behaviors that I might teach. I have handouts that live on the cloud, and I send the client a link in that shared document that says, go find my loose leash walking handout, here it is. I keep online cloud templates for feedback and instructions. If I keep saying to people, here's how you do eye contact, here are the steps, and essentially all I need to do is substitute in their dog's name, I've got that document in the cloud somewhere so I can copy and paste it into the shared document I have with my client. If you're running classes, which at this point I am not doing, but if you're running classes, what you might consider doing is having a Facebook group where the class members can get together, share videos, talk about where they're having problems, and you can help them make sure that they're practicing successfully. And if you're teaching a lot of classes online, you might consider some kind of course platform or learning management system. There's a whole lot of different ones out there. I'm not going to comment really on any of them specifically, but I just want you to know that that option exists. So quickly recapping, when you're getting ready for an online meeting, I want to make sure that you have a non-distracting, quiet environment. No pets or humans wandering in, no clutter in the background. You want to be lit well. You want good lighting. If you are backlit, clients will have trouble seeing you. And you want to have your props in reach. You want everything to be easy to grab a hold of. And finally, you want to have those backup communication options nearby just in case something goes wrong with the online meeting. One more thing is probably on your mind, and that is, how do I market online sessions? Now, the good news is that the pandemic has marketed online sessions for us quite effectively. But as I mentioned, I've been doing online sessions for years. And I think that as the pandemic starts to relax, if you enjoyed doing online sessions, you may find that you want to do more of them. So here are some marketing bullet points that I use. So the first thing is, I tell everyone I can teach all the same things virtually or online as in person. And this is absolutely true. I can teach all the same things. I can't necessarily teach it to their dog, but I can teach it to the human, and the human is the person I'm teaching. I do not need to see a behavior to help address it. And this is true even if I'm meeting in person with people who have, say, a dog with aggression issues. I do not particularly want to see those aggression issues. I don't need to see them. I trust their description. As long as I understand what the circumstances are and more or less what the behavior looks like, I can help them, which means I can help them online just as well as in person. Another point is that my very presence in person can become a real distraction or trigger for a dog. I cannot tell you how many clients I have whose dogs get super excited when I walk in because I am the fun learning time lady. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, and they can't really think as well, or they get into learning mode because I'm there, but as soon as I leave, they're not in learning mode anymore. And what I say to clients is, in the end, the dog needs to do it for you, not for me. I do not live with your dog, you live with your dog. So the most important task for me as your trainer is to teach you how to get the behavior you want from your dog. I do not need to be there in person to teach you how to get the behavior you want from your dog. So hopefully that'll help a little bit. Some other things about marketing online sessions. Your schedule might be more flexible. For me, my schedule is way more flexible with online sessions. I am allergic to driving in traffic, so I will only see clients in an extremely limited area at anything that even approaches rush hour. But I don't have to leave my home to do online sessions. So if they want to see me at rush hour and they're across a freeway from me, no problem. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I like to record sessions. That can be a marketing point. Your sessions are recorded and you can review them as often as you want. That's a pretty decent sales point. If they're concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to figure out how to join the online session, offer them technical support. And you can do technical support both before and after the session. Maybe they're having trouble joining the meeting. Maybe they're having trouble figuring out how to view their video or access their notes. Offer that technical support. It will usually take very little time. Other things you might do. Create an online training marketing video, like a video that is specifically geared towards this topic, and put it up on your website. Use social media to spread the word that you are now offering online sessions. Reach out to current clients, even the ones you used to see in person, and say, hey, I can do a 30-minute check-in with you online, again, because I don't have to drive, so I don't have to account for the drive time, right? And that 30-minute session only costs half as much as it would if I came and saw you in person for an hour. So reach out to them, say, hey, do you want any new tips? Do you need to review anything? Do you want to touch base? You can also just send them tips and tricks and then say, hey, if you have any friends who want a trainer, I am training offline. You can offer virtual lunch and learns, just like we all used to do at veterinary offices in person. I want to thank DogBiz, that's Veronica and Gina at DogBiz, for bringing this one to my attention. And you also want to let your referral sources know that you are now offering online training. So whether that's a veterinary office or a grooming place or dog walkers, say to them, hey, I know a lot of people are uncomfortable about having someone come into their home. Well, guess what? I'm doing online sessions, and if they'd like to do an online session with me, I would love to have them. And also return the favor and refer back to those referral sources if you aren't already, and make sure if they're doing online work to explain to your clients that they offer an online version of what they do. One more thing that I just touched on briefly that I'm going to go into a little bit more in detail now is don't forget that a lot of people are actually anxious about having someone in their home in the face of this pandemic. So saying to them, I can give you the same excellent service, but we do it via video, and there's no way that we're transmitting any virus across video, or at least any human virus across video. Some people will say, wow, that's fantastic. I didn't even realize that was an option. Thank you. When can I book? Let's take a moment to talk about pricing. Now, when I first started teaching online sessions, the world was normal, and I charged the same for online sessions as I did for in-person sessions. When this pandemic started, I started offering a discount. It was sort of a pandemic discount for online sessions. I have to tell you that I regret it in retrospect. I'm finding that with the number of online clients I have, the amount of work involved in making sure that the notes are shared and everything is fine, it's just really taking me too much time, and I don't feel that I'm getting a fair rate for the amount of hourly work I'm putting in. So my discount for the pandemic goes away on January 1st. My online sessions and my in-person sessions will be the same price. Something you might want to consider is sometimes discounting means more people come in and buy. Sometimes discounting means people think that the thing is less valuable. So if you're discounting your online sessions, does that mean my online sessions aren't as good as my in-person sessions? That kind of clashes with my marketing message that online sessions are really, really great and might even in some way be better than in-person sessions. So you might want to consider playing a little bit with your price. Raise the price, see if you get more people for online. Lower the price, see if you get more people for online. Depends on what kind of business you want to drive. If you want to basically be seeing clients online only, price so that you drive that, and a little bit of trial and error may be involved. I do not offer discounts starting January 1st for online sessions, and I didn't used to offer them before 2020. But what I always have offered is packages. If you want a package, you get a package discount. I do the same thing with online sessions. One session times 5 is more than a 5-session package, and so on. But however you price things, don't cheapen your services, Because if you look like a discount provider, they assume that the value is lower. Dog training, as I mentioned in my other presentation, I firmly believe is a Giffen good. And Giffen goods are goods where as the price goes up, demand goes up to a point, but as the price goes up, demand goes up because the price is tied to their perceived value. If I'm looking for a dog trainer and I see one who's charging $20 an hour and another who's charging $50 an hour, I am likely to assume that the $50 an hour trainer is the better trainer, even if the $20 an hour trainer is actually more qualified. So make sure not to cheapen your services so that you don't convince people you're worth less than you are. Stand up for your skills, stand up for your qualifications, and price yourself accordingly. One last note. You may be considering whether or not to make online training a permanent part of your service offerings. So I'd like to share some of the advantages that I've found for me personally. One thing is that there's no driving time. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm spending less time on the client because, maybe I needed to copy and paste some notes and that took me a moment after our meeting. Or if you're like me, I like to edit things over and over and over, so I might get caught up editing it a little too much, where with handwritten notes, I just handwrote them and walked out, and that was the end of my editing process. But in general, I find that it does mean I can fit more people in per day, because I used to have to allow a certain amount of time to drive between clients, and now I need to allow less time than that between clients. So more clients per day, which means a little higher income. Also, for me, driving is stressful, less driving stress if you find driving stressful. I can also offer more flexible hours. I touched on this earlier. Rush hour is not a concern. And when I started doing online sessions, however many years ago that was, it expanded my service area tremendously. I have worked with people all over the place. I am no longer limited to people who are within driving distance of me. Another really nice thing is that it's safer. I am not being exposed to dangerous dogs. You may not specialize in high anxiety and aggressive behaviors and fearful behaviors, but I actually have a lot of those clients. And whenever you walk into the home of a dog who has a history of biting humans, you are literally taking a risk. You're relying on the client to do everything right that you've asked them to do in advance, and they don't always do everything right. So, online sessions, you're not exposed to those dangerous dogs. You're also not exposed to any diseases they might have. Even if you're not worried about COVID-19, it's nice to be less likely to catch the common cold or the flu. The other thing is that you're not entering strangers' homes. And I, as a woman, always have to be thinking, is someone trying to take advantage of me? I think even men should be thinking about this. So in the end, you are making a leap of faith when you walk into a stranger's home. And with online training, that's not an issue. I hope this information has been helpful, and I'd like to summarize really quickly for you a few important points. One is, now is the time to start marketing virtual sessions. If you haven't done it already, start now. It is the way of the future. There will be more and more of this. If you really hate it and you want to stick to in-person only, that's fine. But if you're even considering it, start marketing online sessions. As you do that, make sure you are covered, legally speaking, that your contract is right, your insurance is right, and everything you're doing is set up so that if there is a dispute, you are at least working from a position of strength. Don't feel like you need to do everything I just mentioned right out the gate. Start as simple and easy as you need. If you want to start with phone sessions and handwriting notes while you're on the phone with the client, please feel free to do that. If you're feeling bolder and you want to start doing online video meetings, go ahead and do that. If you don't want to share notes online, you just want to email them to the client, that's fine. Work to the level that is comfortable for you. Start as simple and easy as you need. And no matter what you do, put some systems in place to increase your efficiency so you're not spending too much time on the sort of nitty-gritty administrative work of making online sessions happen. I always welcome questions and comments, so please feel free to reach out to me. My website is listed at the top. The best way to reach me is my email, which is trainer@thesophisticatedDog.com. I am fairly commonly on Facebook at facebook.com, The Sophisticated Dog. I have a LinkedIn page where I spend a reasonable amount of time. I'm on Twitter technically, but I'm not there very often, and I have an Instagram channel, but you'll see that it's pretty stale. So if you want to reach out to me, email is the best way to do so, and I would love to hear from you, questions, comments, suggestions. Thank you again so much for your time and attention, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful holiday season.